The Middle Ages, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century in European history, is often depicted as a romantic era of knights, chivalry, and soaring cathedrals. Yet beneath this veneer of grandeur lay a world saturated with superstition, fear of the unknown, and a potent blend of religious devotion and dread. Many saw devils lurking in shadows, suspected neighbors of practicing black magic, and believed witches, werewolves, or other malignant forces could explain a host of everyday misfortunes. In this era, faith could inspire magnificent works of architecture and theology, while simultaneously fueling mass hysteria, gruesome witch hunts, and lethal inquisitions. One of the clearest manifestations of medieval Europe's dark side is the widespread witch trials that plagued both rural villages and urban centers. Although the peak of the witch craze took place more notably between the 15th and 18th centuries, the groundwork was laid in medieval times. Many communities, coping with crop failures, outbreaks of plague, or unexplained cattle deaths, sought a scapegoat. Loners, healers, midwives, or any individual deemed strange or threatening could be accused of witchcraft. Such accusations often played out in local ecclesiastical courts, but the condemnation process was riddled with torture, forced confessions, and testimonies coerced by fear. The Church's doctrine on heresy and the persistent belief in the devil's tangible presence made these trials especially brutal. Even though some clerics questioned the validity of witchcraft claims, local panics could override official skepticism. The result was the execution, often by hanging or burning, of countless people, predominantly women. Medieval magical practices went beyond simply conjuring devils. In a time of limited scientific knowledge, natural magic, or white magic, blurred the lines between early science, herbal healing, and mystical ritual. Alchemists sought the fabled philosopher's stone, hoping to transmute base metals into gold or find elixirs granting eternal life. Astrologers charted the heavens, advising rulers on propitious moments for battle or treaty. To modern eyes, these pursuits look like superstition, but many seeds of later science, chemistry, astronomy, germinated here. Figures like Roger Bacon in the 13th century championed empirical investigation despite accusations of dabbling in forbidden arts. Meanwhile, older pagan practices survived in pockets of Europe, sometimes syncretized with Christian festivals. Folk healers used herbal remedies passed down through generations, occasionally attracting accusations of diabolic knowledge if their cures or potions appeared too effective. Religious fervor itself took on dramatic forms. Public flagellant movements, for example, emerged in the wake of the Black Death. Groups of penitents, believing the plague was divine punishment, marched through towns whipping themselves to atone for humanity's sins. Such spectacles exemplified the medieval mindset, where the boundary between spiritual devotion and collective hysteria could dissolve in times of crisis. Similarly, heresy hunts against groups like the Cathars or Waldensians revealed how fiercely medieval institutions sought uniformity in faith. The Inquisition, a system of courts established by the Catholic Church, aimed to extinguish heretical beliefs. But in practice, it could be weaponized for personal vendettas or political goals, unleashing intimidation, torture, and executions in the name of preserving orthodoxy. Yet the Middle Ages were not uniformly dark. This was also the epoch of cathedral building, an architectural testament to devout creativity. Towns competed to erect soaring Gothic spires that reached toward heaven, embedding theological symbolism into every stained glass window and carved gargoyle. Monastic communities preserved knowledge by copying ancient manuscripts, laying foundations for the later intellectual blossoming known as the Renaissance. Universities were established. Bologna, Oxford, Paris, fostering scholastic debate that painstakingly merged classical philosophy with Christian doctrine. If one looked at the intellectual life of 12th and 13th century Europe, they would see robust discourse on Aristotle's works, translations from Arabic sources, and the gradual formation of a proto-scientific mindset. Even so, these centers of learning existed side by side with the fear of unseen evil powers and a readiness to blame witches or demons for calamities. One must also consider political and social structure. The feudal system, with its rigid hierarchy, often stoked local tensions that could erupt into accusations of sorcery or alliances with the devil. A peasant who challenged a lord or a noblewoman who asserted too much independence risked being portrayed as dabbling in the occult. Moreover, popular piety, fueled by lively folklore, integrated saintly miracles with local superstitions. Sacred relics, bones of saints or fragments of the true cross, were believed to hold miraculous powers. Pilgrims traveled hundreds of miles to shrines seeking cures or spiritual blessings, blending fervent devotion with a cultural inclination toward the mystical. This interplay of miracle and magic meant that the line between accepted piety and heretical sorcery was razor-thin, often subject to the whims of local clergy or power brokers. Women, in particular, found themselves vulnerable within this matrix of medieval beliefs. With limited legal rights, they were susceptible to accusations if they violated gender norms, perhaps by living alone, possessing knowledge of herbs, or challenging patriarchal structures. The stereotype of the witch feeding at the devil's teat or riding a broomstick emerged in part due to popular anxieties around female power. Some historians argue that such fears also stemmed from broader shifts, like the Church's effort to regulate childbirth practices once handled by female midwives, or attempts to centralize moral authority. Cases show that older women who acted as healers were easily labeled witches if a treatment failed, or if envy or local disputes flared. Occasionally, real conspiracies or misunderstood phenomena lent credence to beliefs in secret cults. Medieval records speak of alleged gatherings, Sabbaths, where witches worshipped Satan or performed unholy rites. While modern scholars dismiss most such accounts as prosecutorial fantasies, the narratives underscore how imaginative and paranoid the era could be. People who suffered nightmares or sleep paralysis might wake convinced they had been attacked by demonic forces. Indeed, some medieval grimoires or books of magic do survive, manuals claiming to teach summoning of angels, demons, or nature spirits. These texts sit uncomfortably between genuine attempts at spiritual exploration and sensational fabrications. In either case, their existence shaped the fear that malevolent practitioners lurked in every community. Where does this leave the modern observer? On one hand, the Middle Ages' dark secrets demonstrate the destructive potential of superstition and unbridled zeal. Innocent lives were ruined by witch hunts and heresy trials, while genuine knowledge, like early scientific inquiry, risked suppression if it conflicted with strict doctrinal lines. On the other hand, the era also produced a robust spiritual and intellectual culture that advanced philosophy, architecture, and the eventual emergence of new scientific disciplines. Paradoxically, the same world that built Notre Dame and charted the works of Aristotle also believed wholeheartedly in night-flying witches. In popular imagination, medieval Europe is often caricatured as wholly benighted, ignoring that, simultaneously, luminous achievements took place. Yet it is accurate to say that fear and faith permeated everyday life to a degree scarcely paralleled in modern secular societies. Understanding this complexity helps us appreciate the Middle Ages as an era of contradictions. Devout monks striving for truth, yet prosecuting heretics. Local healers bridging folk tradition and budding empirical techniques, yet branded as witches. Fervent architecture projects financed by communities who might also attend witch burnings, if stirred by local rumor. Ultimately, the dark secrets of the Middle Ages remind us how easily fear and misunderstanding can overshadow reason. It is a cautionary tale about the fragility of social trust when adversity drives people to hunt scapegoats. Reflecting on these centuries of witchcraft accusations, alchemical pursuits, and rigid dogmatic structures offers lessons for any age. That knowledge must be safeguarded, that minority practices deserve fair hearing, and that the line between faith and fanaticism remains perilously thin.